and welcome to the Divorce Not Divided podcast.
I'm Meg Phillips.
Yeah, and I'm Nathan Burkhart.
And you know what? We have great news for you. We both found a chick.
No.
No, but really, look at these little nuggets that just joined my home family life. I have an established coop outside.
This one pooped in my hand again.
Again?
Yeah, it's the fourth time. You can keep going.
Oh,
it's
God,
fine.
okay.
I gotta go wash my hands.
Somebody needs to Nate keeps getting dumped on by chicks. We'll be back. So today's topic, as Nate washes his hands, is going to be about boundaries. But which I think we found a boundary just now. Nate doesn't really like holding chicks. Nate, was that a boundary for you? Was it crossed?
I don't know what it was. We'll dissect that throughout our episode today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know if your feelings come up.
So, but we usually like to start our podcast off by saying that this isn't therapeutic or lawyerly advice.
Lawyerly.
Device.
Yes, we are a lifestyle podcast. And any advice or things that we suggest work for us. And we are not therapists or doctors. So if you need that type of help, you can check out our resource page at divorcednotdivided.net. And we hope you seek that if you need that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the week as far as
clean my
kids
hands.
are concerned. Clearly, Megan got some chicks at her house as far as chickens.
Yeah, as far as chickens.
So my kids, or our kids, I guess you get used to saying our kids still, but they're all asking me why we don't have chickens at my house and why I don't have any animals, because they have a growing amount of animals at their mom's house.
Yes.
But none at mine.
Yeah, no, I have a Sphinx cat. And for those of you that don't know what that means, I have a hairless cat because I deserve that. And then, so the cat's got a kitten did I say the cat's got a kitten? The kid's got a kitten. And then, as winter has progressed and I'm in my new house that already had an established chicken coop, I went and got 7 little chicks. And the kids keep asking Nate, like, why aren't we having any pets? So, Nate, why don't you have any pets?
That's a great question. They also want to know why I don't just bring them over here to look at the chickens whenever they want, because they think that should be possible too. Mm-hmm. I think the way I've addressed this with them is Dad doesn't want to take care of an animal right now because Dad's trying to figure out how to take care of himself right now. So that's kind of how we've addressed the situation for the present.
And I've let them know that the way that I take care of myself is snuggling and loving and taking care of animals when they're not here.
Sure. But we thought that would be fun to share because the kids sometimes will want to know why it's happening at one house but not the other.
Yep.
They think that one house is more fun because of the adventures and fun little critters that are coming over. But that's just something you have to deal with. There are going to be differences at each home that you have to navigate. And they have to understand that, like, just because mom does something, that doesn't mean that their dad's going to do it too.
Right. But I do think you should get a dog.
Okay. That's my decision.
Because I don't want a dog.
But so as Megan mentioned before, our episode today is about boundaries. This is kind of a really hot topic word right now. Mm-hmm. I would say that I've heard it a lot more as of late than I had in my other 38 years of existence.
Yep.
And I think that the reason that it is such a hot topic as of late is because it's something that people are learning how to take care of and protect.
Well, we didn't even know what they were. I mean, and learning what boundaries are and how they can help your mental health in several areas and relationships with not just others, but a relationship with yourself has been incredibly valuable. But how does it relate to divorce? Mm-hmm. And how does it relate specifically to us, and what type of boundaries? Because when we chose to move forward intentionally with having a collaborative co-parenting situation. You know, we do need boundaries to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. Because Nate and I, while collaborative, we live in different homes and we're not married anymore. So we need to come up with ways to make sure that we're staying healthy and putting up those boundaries when they're necessary.
And I will say that right when we went through our divorce and for a period of time, we operated in some aspects like a married couple should. And I don't think that that was always the best for us as far as like having open access to the home and in situations like that. Right. So we've learned over time a better way to navigate and communicate those thoughts and feelings with each other.
Yeah.
Because again, this was a very new concept for us to begin with.
Yeah.
I think the first time I ever heard about boundaries at all, there was a book that I had read, and then somebody had recommended another book called Boundaries to me. And I went through and I read all of that. And I was like, wow, I don't have any with any people. Right. You look at my actual work life, right? There's people that call me and I'll pick up within 2 minutes. And what that does ultimately is it teaches them.
Well, when you're off the clock.
Yeah. When I'm supposed to be home with my kids, not doing other things, I would pick up the phone whenever someone called. And what that does is it teaches people that you're available all the time.
Right.
And while some people, and you might be one of them, think that that's the way that you want to run, that wasn't really what was best for my mental health. Being able to separate my work life from my life was important. Being able to sit down and say, it's okay for me to have my own personal time was important. I'll talk in another episode how I've got people-pleasing traits at times, and that's because I have fear of people leaving me or getting upset at me for various things that have happened in my life over time, right? But I think for me, understanding how to love yourself in a way where you demand respect and you communicate what your boundaries are and ask people to respect those boundaries is important.
Yeah. So let's jump back, because I like that you started talking about some of the boundaries that we needed to find, or like, you know, kind of the situation where we're like, oh, there should be something there,
right?
You know? And one of them was, I was in an apartment for the first 2 years. You were in a home. And yeah, let's dive in there. Talk a little bit about open access and how we realized that needed to change.
Yeah. So I would say that when I had a house, we were trying to figure out the best way to take care of the kids' child schedules, right?
Especially during summer.
Yeah. During summer, it was always complicated because I had a house that had a backyard, and I very much over time wanted space where the kids could come and run around and stuff. And the way that our marriage settlement agreement read, as far as watching the kids, Megan is largely in charge of taking care of them during the summer months. And because I take care of them a lot more during the
it's equal months. During the school months, but I drop them off before school and sometimes pick up after school.
Meaning drops them off at my house, and then I'm in charge of taking them to school and picking them up on most days.
Yep.
So what ends up happening when she had her apartment, it was important to me that the kids could come and run around outside, but a boundary that we needed to establish, because it didn't need to be open access either, where you could just come over and have the kids playing around whenever they wanted.
If it was your day, I mean, you want to have access to your home for whatever situation.
Exactly.
You know,
so let's get into a story that kind of illustrates this. So there was one time where Holden was going to have a sleepover for the first time. Okay.
Yeah.
And he ended up spending the night at somebody's house. And I found out like after it had already happened.
Right.
And I reached out to you and I said, one boundary that I would like to put in place and request is that if our kids are going to be spending the night at somebody's house, that you at least let me know.
Right.
Because I'd like to know where my kids are sleeping every single day, just as you would, you know, and so are our kids. So that was something that I had put in. It wasn't an attack at you at all. It was something that we had never gone through before.
And I didn't take it as an attack. I mean, I think at first I was like, it's my day and night with them.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, if we were to still be together, you'd know he was having a sleepover.
Right.
And you'd know he was at a different home. So it wasn't an attack, and it was something that we just needed to talk through. And these things that come up quite spontaneously, or, you know, and I didn't even think to be like, hey, Holden's going to have a sleepover. It's going to be in a different house. You know, what do you think about that? Because it was his first sleepover.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a really valid request.
Sure.
And I think since then, I think I texted you and said, hey, he was invited for a sleepover this night. What do you think? And you're like, awesome.
Yep.
I just want to know.
Yeah. And it's just, it makes me feel better to know where my kids are.
Or if there was any any emergency at any situation, you would know where every member of your family is at. And
sure.
That's what we wanted to solidify. And so these boundaries aren't always like offensive or, you know, like will cause a rift. It's just like, oh, we hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I do want to know that too.
Yeah. I mean, other boundaries that we've had to talk about too is like when you might get a text back. In the beginning, when you're married, you can text somebody at any time of day and night and know that they might get back to you. One of the things that we've had to learn over time is understanding that we might be with other people.
Right.
And like when it's our day off and we don't have kids, and I've talked this about the kids too. We have a text message thread that we'll share that Holden sent when he was looking for his chickens and he wanted mom's attention really bad and he had my phone. No, we'll share that. And what you got to navigate is when you don't have the kids that day, you're not necessarily looking for text messages from your co-parent. And the co-parent shouldn't have expectations that the other person is going to respond within minutes every single time you send a text message, right?
Yeah.
There's other things they might be doing. You might be on a date with somebody.
Right.
And how like not fun is it to be on a date and be getting texts from your previous wife or previous husband in your case? To me, that would be like, what's going on over there? It's just something that we aren't comfortable with. And we've learned...
I mean, I don't have a problem
you
getting
just
a
ignore
text.
it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem getting a text or anything. It's just I'm going to answer it when I have the capacity to answer it. I'm not going to be tied to that phone. I think we had talked about, too, like if we call twice in a row, that would mean like
this
emergency pickup. Like this is an emergency about the kids. This isn't like, you know, or like this is affecting the children, pick up. But the problem was when Holden had your phone, it's like I had like 12 missed calls.
No, I had 18 missed calls from him the other day. He's learning. He's only 8. But I think that as we continue to figure out what boundaries are, being able to say, hey, look, you called me multiple times and it turned out to be a question about the login for blah, blah, blah. And that's not an emergency, right? And understanding what is an emergency, when is it appropriate to call multiple times, understanding that the other person has a life that they're trying to rebuild. It's all important. And understanding that there's other feelings involved too.
Yeah. And like, I think, you know, we've learned like courtesy texts like, hey, do you have the capacity to take a phone call right now?
Yeah.
About this. And like, no, let's connect at this time. You know, just that kind of stuff. Whereas, you know, a lot of times during married life, you just be like, hey, pick up.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I would. Maybe that's just me.
This is something we're learning though, right?
Yeah.
And it's nothing that we're perfect on yet. It's something that we're not perfect on yet. I think that for us, as we continue to navigate it and get feedback from other people, and that's all good. And I've learned, I've learned over time, calling Megan at 10 o'clock at night, it's probably not a great idea because A, she's probably not going to pick up anyway, and B, there's really no emergency unless the kids need to go to the hospital where it can't be addressed the next day.
Yeah.
But that is something that we've had to learn about over time and learn how to communicate with each other about, because it was a change in communication style for us.
You know, transition. I'm going to sing that every time now because you did that. Transition. Also, boundaries about certain topics, like where even if, I mean, you and I are pretty comfortable discussing most topics, but there's been moments where, because we never know, even though we've been working to heal things, when something's going to trigger.
Sure.
And there's been situations where we'll start a conversation with honest intent and kindness, and there's a moment where one of us has to say, "Hey, I can't keep going down this line of conversation. I'm getting emotions." Like, and I don't even know. Sometimes I'm like, "Hold on, I can't right now." And you've done that too, where you're like, "Nope, I'm going to have to save this for another time," or we're going to have to, put a fork in that one.
Let me ask you a question. So, what happens when you put a boundary on somebody? I don't think I've ever done this, but I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on it. And then they look at you and say, "It's not fair that you've put that boundary on me."
Ooh. Are you talking about a specific instance that I've done that?
No.
Okay. I'm just trying to be like, how do I answer this if it's me?
One of these things that I have felt, and I'll say this. Yeah. It's like back in the day when I was going through a lot of hurt, if somebody would have put a boundary on me, I would have turned the table on them and said, "Well, you don't understand why I'm doing it. Let me explain." And then I'd explain why I'm doing something, opposed to listening to why they actually wanted that boundary put in the first place and respecting it. So it's more for my own knowledge about how do we not use boundaries as an offensive thing that somebody got put in place because they did something wrong as a way of punishing somebody. Because boundaries aren't, in my opinion, I don't use boundaries as forms of punishment. I use them as forms of way of protecting myself and making sure.
Which is what they're supposed to be used for.
Right.
Well, I mean, I guess in that situation, saying, "Okay, I need a pause so I can process what you're asking," so that you don't respond right away with like anger or frustration. Being like, "Oh, I hear the boundary you're asking for. Let me pause, reflect, and process and get back to you so we can communicate about it. And I might have some follow-up questions for you."
I like that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that way because if it's going to hit you the wrong way, and then if after you've processed it, maybe with your therapist or like processed it with friends or family or people that can support you, if you feel like that boundary was something that was used as a punishment or in a way like almost feels somewhat as a way of manipulation or something, then you've taken the time to be able to say, "Hey, this is," without attacking, like, "This is how I feel this boundary was brought into place. Are there other feelings we need to talk about and navigate? Because this boundary feels more like this, and I want to make sure that we can confront the root."
Yeah, I really like that. And I think if you look at the way my brain operates in real life, if somebody gives me feedback on something, I might get really pissed off in the beginning. Sometimes like the best way to deal with Nathan is just to give him some time to process things and understand your perspective on life. And usually sometimes when you hear feedback, you don't hear that right away. You just hear about what you're doing wrong. And when that might not have been the goal to communicate that at all, right? And so giving that time to say, "Hey, can I think about that a little bit?" Or even myself taking time after I've communicated the boundary to think about why I really need that in is good. And so taking time to process, because most of the time when someone pisses me off by giving me feedback like that, I go away and I think about what the feedback was they just gave me. And I start seeing and understanding why they might have said that.
Right.
As that anger minimalizes, I start being like, "Oh yeah, so this is what they were actually trying to say. I just got angry because they're telling me," like I interpret it like they're telling me I'm not a perfect person or I'm a bad person, but that's not what they were trying to say. Yeah. They're trying to say, "Hey, I feel this way when you do that. Is there any way that you cannot do that so I don't feel this way?"
Right.
And you should look at that as a gift because they felt safe enough to actually say that to you, right?
Right.
But I'm saying it's like in the past, I haven't always processed things like that.
Yeah. And there probably are situations too where someone puts on a boundary and after you've processed it, it's like, "I need more information."
Sure.
And I do need to know the root of where this boundary is coming from because maybe we should address that.
Sure.
there was an incredible therapist that did a workshop that I was able to listen in on and be a part of. And I think one of the most important things that she said was so many people during a high, like an escalated moment where the emotions are maybe dysregulated, and there's a chance for communication that's hurtful or harmful, that people do not take the time to take time. So if it's getting escalated and one person's, and this was specifically about like adult children dynamics, but this works with any dynamic, and I loved it. And she said, the power of saying, whoa, I'm getting incredibly escalated here. I need 5 minutes to calm myself down before I can communicate. Otherwise, it won't be healthy for either of us.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're in like child classes when they're teaching you how to parent.
Yeah.
And they're like, if you get really angry, just go sit down for 5 minutes, and you just got to remove yourself from the situation.
And that's what you need to even do with adults.
Sure.
Because, and saying, but like clearly communicating, I need to regulate myself so I can have a healthier communication with you. Please give me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or I need to address this tomorrow. We're going to have to, like, I do want to address this, but the way I'm feeling, it's going to come off and hurt.
Yeah. And I think what people need to understand, it's like any true relationship is going to have tons of ups and downs. And the way that you navigate a relationship with somebody you're in an active relationship with, is like a dating relationship, is going to be way different from somebody that you're friends with, and way different from some relationship that you were with that ended. I think the things that we continue to navigate, and like how do those boundaries change when we were married and we had tons of things going on in our life? How do the boundaries relate around child communication and all that when they're not around all the time? How do they change when we're trying to build a friendship opposed to a marriage life, which is a different type of relationship? I mean, all those boundaries are going to change. And I guess what I really like about what you said is that they should change in being able to communicate them and understand that feelings might come up, and allowing those people to process those feelings when a boundary has been set that they might not like, or that somebody felt a certain way, had to put up a boundary, is important. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that's important. I think we do, it's hit or miss, because we're what? We're 2.5 years into it being separated, almost a solid 2 years being divorced.
Right.
And it's taken time to get here. I think it was harder when you set boundary, like from a personal level. I think I felt if you set a boundary or you would put a boundary, because I was, we'll go back to a previous episode's content, but because I was the one who dumped you, the dumper, because I was that person, and I went in and I really, really wanted a friendship. I really wanted, I envisioned, I think I read about my journal, but I envisioned this peaceful co-parenting situation. When you would put a boundary, it would stress me out and be like, oh my gosh, he doesn't want this anymore. And I would freak out, and I would take it personally at the beginning. Fear. Now, when you come forward and you're like, hey, like these are this is a boundary that I'm trying to think of specifics that like unless it's about the kids and an emergency, like can we like hold texting past this time? Or that was earlier. I think we've kind of changed that already a little bit. I was scared to death that I was losing you as a friend, that all this co-parenting was going to crash, and I know. Right. But it was taking time to be like, why is this boundary being put in place? Should I take this boundary personal, or should I know that Nathan needs this boundary for something that's going on in his life? And if it's something that's going on in his life, which it must be, because I don't feel like, I was able to isolate it and go, oh, then let's honor that space and that time and that boundary. And if that boundary can change later, based on whatever, then it will. And, otherwise, like take it as it comes. And I've learned to be less explosive.
Sure.
And I'm trying to be less explosive because I think I was a pretty explosive person.
Yeah. And I think I've become less explosive as my brain has calmed down over time. I think that my brain was in a constant state of chaos for a little bit. So any little thing that somebody would do to me, I would make a really big deal about it, opposed to just trying to understand this is really not a big issue. This is something that I'm making bigger than I need to. I mean, for me, I think what you said is great. I think one thing that may be cool to work for is over time learning to trust that the friendship won't go away. That's not the goal. And understanding if somebody says, look, I need to just make sure that you do this because I feel that way, not needing an explanation, that the feeling is enough.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, I feel like I need an explanation or I need to explain myself. I like that is a complete defense mechanism. When I start explaining, being like, well, I thought that you would do this and this and this, and that's why I did. I was just trying to, that's a defense mechanism opposed to just being like, oh, what I did made her feel like that she wasn't important. So I need to go home and think and see if I want to change my boundaries or leave them where they are, based on how that person feels. And depending on the given circumstances at the time, you'll know what's appropriate and what's not.
Right. And I think what's also super cool about making sure there's communication between us that's free flowing is that there will be times that boundaries need to be there. And then there will be times when those boundaries can be lifted. It just depends, because what we need in the moment can and will and is supposed to ebb, change, and grow as we change and grow.
Yeah, I very much want another serious relationship in my life one day. And that person is going to need to hold a very, very important spot in my life.
Yes.
And they need to make sure that they're in the position that they need to be in and that you're my friend who I co-parent with.
Right. And if I'm comfortable with receiving and understanding your needs and boundaries, I'm going to be incredibly, like, the more we practice, the better it is, because when that person shows up for you, and I want to be super open and receptive to what that person's boundaries are, for what our friendship has become, their needs and their understandings and their boundaries.
For all you know, it's your best friend and you know everything about them.
Right.
And we don't know what they've gone through in their life, right? Because when you start dating again in your mid 30s to 40s, you're dealing with somebody that probably has gone through something in their life, and that's the reason that they're that way, right?
Right. I mean, like, you don't usually enter into the dating world in your 40s without having
either
some experience
or breakup.
It
doesn't need to be like super dramatic, but I mean, they probably have had relationships that didn't work out at that point.
Yeah.
That or they don't have experience with this type of relationship, and this is new to them, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate that because maybe they were career focused, for example.
Right.
So I think that's cool. That's kind of neat to think about. And that boundaries book will list in our information for the podcast so people can kind of read it. That's one of like the 4 books that I had read and jumped into. It's a neat book. I mean, it talks a lot about how it links to Christianity too. And I know we talked in a previous episode, or that's something that I stick to.
Yep.
I always, for a long time in my head, I was like, well, how can I not just help everybody? Because if I don't help anybody or I don't concede my boundaries and all that, I'm not actually thinking of them in the way that Jesus did. But what I actually learned, it's like you have to be able to take care of yourself too and not get completely walked all over in order to best provide for your kids or the other people in your life.
Well, do you remember that poem I wrote recently about the left cheek, right cheek.
On your Facebook.
Yeah, and it was a poem that I had to write that came to me because I kept thinking about how there was that Bible verse that says, like, if someone slaps you on your right, turn and offer your left, or if left, turn and offer, whatever,
Yeah.
And I ended up writing a poem about that very thing. Is I thought it meant I kept having to turn the cheek, and then it dawned on me one day that we only have two cheeks, and then you get to put up a boundary.
Sure.
And
but I don't think you mean weaponizing it either. A boundary is not to be weaponized.
No, but put up a boundary yourself. To protect. Yeah. No, that's what I meant. Like
right.
you can turn your cheek and have that mindset of, like, okay, hit one side, hit the other. You don't have to just keep getting beat up. That's right. That's not the message I think was being delivered in that text. Can we touch on the fact that Nate has read like 400 books about divorce, and I have not mentioned like a single book that I've read on divorce.
Megan doesn't read.
I actually read a lot. Rude.
She reads a lot more than I do.
I do. My books, because I think I talked about the difficulty of what I was navigating, where there were layers. And the things that scared me the most, I knew I'd get through the divorce part. I was scared to death about just figuring out where I fit into my faith, and where my queerness fit into it. And I read a lot of books about how to be able to still choose being a Christ follower. So those were the types of books that I dove into, and we can maybe have a podcast about that soon. But I just wanted you guys to know that I wasn't just like, well, I got a divorce and watched like a bunch of Netflix. I was reading different types of books, but Nate read a lot of good divorce books. But you lent me the Boundaries book.
Yeah.
I did. And I read half of it.
Yeah. I thought reading books.
So I can set a half of a boundary.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of people who were reaching out to me that went through it, and we were trading books. There's one person I traded a book or two with, and we're like, hey, read this. You read this. It was great. There was this one book called Single on Purpose, and
cool.
It was really funny because the first book I read was very like, it almost meant like surgical. It was like to the point, like you do this, very matter of fact. And this one like was dropping F-bombs everywhere. And it's like, yeah, this is the way it's going to go. And it was just like completely written in a different way. And I think that there was value in both of them. I mean, another one that I had listened to, it was not, I disagreed with a lot of the philosophy in it, but it was very much about making sure that I understand what it means to have value and learn how to think highly of yourself.
Yeah.
Because that was torched for a really long time,
well,
right?
We talked about that in the last episode with Dr. Brooks about learning actually, statistically, you're going to have a better healing process if you focus on and make sure that your self-worth is addressed.
Yeah. I mean, like the way that it kind of was challenged, I know we're getting off topic here, but I think that's fine. It was like, if you describe what I do for a living, you could say, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. Or you can learn to say, you know what I like to do? For my job, I sit down and I partner with other organizations in the city to make it a better place to live.
Yeah.
And so it's learning how to make yourself more than just a job title, right?
And almost reframe the language. Language is so important in how we talk to ourselves even, right?
Yeah. So let's conclude there, and let's shoot over to Emmy and see what questions we have today.
Okay, so specifically talking about boundaries, and obviously, like you said, it's a pretty hot button word right now, but I found a question from r/divorce on Reddit from 4 years ago. Filet Player as the we'll put the pictures and the stuff in.
You found my name on Reddit.
So they are talking about how like given their situation and their financial situation, they're still they're separated under the same roof as their former spouse, currently going through divorce proceedings. They are talking about, how can I say without hurting him that I only want him to contact me when it is necessary and something important about the household or kids? How do I set a boundary when it comes to spending time together as a family? So how did you say it to one another when the time was that you had to say it?
Now they're still living together under the same roof?
Yes.
Ooh. Well, I mean, I think naturally that just helped that I moved out.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately that, you can speak for yourself, but I think immediately the pain that caused created a pretty firm boundary by it organically.
Yeah. I think the state that we were in when she moved out, she would have said it just like that. If she had moved out and I was calling her all the time, which I naturally was like, she moved out, I'm only going to call her if there's something big. That naturally was just part of that was established for me. But I understand that there might be situations where someone might not get it, right?
You know, I think there were a couple times where you would like reach out and say that you missed me or something like that.
Sure.
And right when I had left, I didn't want any of that because I was trying, I you know, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I've ruined you and he misses me and maybe I should just go back. And like, so, but I think I just responded when, like, I didn't immediately respond, or I didn't give the response like, I'm sorry, or I'd say something like, I'm sorry. And that would be it. Yeah. And it would be enough to where I think you got the message pretty fast, like, okay, this is not a conversation.
Sure. I guess the way that my brain processes, I would want someone to just be blatant and blunt and say it like that, opposed to not respond. Because let's say I've texted you 4 times, right? And if I don't hear anything back, that's where I start going really, really crazy. And this is just speaking on behalf of me. I would much rather have you say, hey, I need like 10 minutes, or don't text me for like 3 days because I need to process this over the next few days.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you when I can. And it's when I read a codependency book, one of the things that had said in there was if somebody like isn't responding to you, a codependent person will naturally just want to keep asking questions or find reasons to ask questions, which is what I do. But I think nowadays, after understanding how I function, I would probably just text somebody if I was the guy on this end, or the other person that wasn't understanding was saying if they hadn't responded to me, being like, do you need a few days right now? Because I noticed that you haven't responded yet. And I want to make sure that I'm respecting your boundaries. Ooh, so that's a good way to like ask. I think that's what I would do. But I know as Nathan, I do really well when someone says, hey, look, I need to set up a boundary. I need time to think about what I want in life right now. And I don't know if you're it, or if we're in this situation, hey, we're separated right now. I really want to make sure that I don't get texts from you every single day asking me how my day is, because I'm trying to create space and heal. And that's what's best for me. Saying it straight out like that to somebody, opposed to just sitting there and thinking about it, would be something that I would personally like, because I can't read minds. Right.
I agree. I think like that specific, or even I'm not going to, or I see that you reached out. I'm going to reach out in a couple of days after I've had time to process.
Yeah.
Just something really, just so they know I've received it. I'm not ignoring you. I'm taking time.
I've done that before. I've probably done that to you before too, where I've texted you being like, hey, just FYI, I saw what you sent. I'm not going to respond tonight.
Yeah.
I don't even need to say a why. I would say, I'm not going to respond tonight. Or I would say, hey, look, I got your message. I wanted to make sure that you knew that I saw it. I'm thinking about it. I'll reach out to you when I'm ready to talk.
Yeah. And that stuff doesn't send me into a spiral. It just lets me know.
Yeah.
we'll talk about it when
I think the confusing thing in this example is they still live together and they're separating. And so they're talking about family events, right? And until you've established a separate living situation,
that's going to be
there's
hard
going
to
to be
do.
some things that they're going to get commingled and it could get messy for sure, right? It's already messy enough as it is.
Right.
When you're sitting down there being like, hey, look, there's a family get together coming up. I think sitting down and talking to each other, say, I know we're separated. Easter's coming up. We're going to have breakfast at my mom's house. I don't think because we're separated that it'd be valuable for you to go because it'd be confusing to other people and be confusing to me.
Right.
Saying something like that was something I'd respond well to.
Mm-hmm.
I would not respond well if we all go together and then we get into a big argument in the car on the way back saying, I wish you didn't come because that was confusing to everyone. And, you told everyone that I have a nice butt at the Easter dinner. And now people are super confused because they thought we were separated. You see it?
No, I know. I just loved your example. Okay.
Not that I'm not pulling from any experiences.
That's what I was going to say is like, this is incredibly creative.
I pulled that from my creative brain, but I don't know. It's a tough thing. I mean, when you're going through a separation, I think we tried to stay separated and not fully divorced. And the big reason why we decided to just get divorced opposed to elongate it out was that we both deserve to start over and we both deserve to start making those boundaries as individuals opposed to trying to set boundaries as a family unit yet.
Yeah, I think so too. You think that answered the question? I think so.
We always one question is let's talk about it for 20 minutes.
Okay, and then just a quick one that I'm curious about. This is not from anything. Is do you have any boundaries that you set on your family or your friends about how you talk about your divorce, maybe in front of the kids, or any boundaries specifically relating to your divorce that you've set for other people in your life that are not each other?
I have never set boundaries. I haven't communicated them, but my parents and my family is always led by my example. So when I come in and they hear me say things like, I'm not going to talk bad about Megan because it's not healthy for them to hear that around my kids. They hear that boundary that's been set. It's not being like, you guys are talking bad about my kids around, talking bad about Megan around my kids, because they didn't really do that. But they hear what I'm trying to do. And because of that, they naturally respect it. So that's kind of the ways I've been able to communicate those boundaries with them, which has worked really, really well.
Yeah, I think, and Nate and I made the decision pretty early on not to talk poorly about each other to the kids. And I mean, there was, the beginning period where it was a little rough, but I think that was more organic. Did we have a conversation about it, or did we just know that's what we were going to do?
I think it just hit a point where it just felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not the same for everyone. Some people you got to be super literal with, and you got to use examples.
Now, with our friends, we've actually had to assure them that they didn't have to pick a side. Because I think some of our friends were, that we had together.
Yeah.
Were worried, what are we going to do here? And some of them even reached out and said, can I invite you both to this event? Can I do this and that?
Yeah, and there was a time actually where I had went to a place where Megan was there and I had told my friend, hey, I'm still healing from everything that went on. Can you please not invite me if Megan's coming? And that's nothing against Megan.
I didn't know you did that.
I'm not ready to be at events like that. And they respected that. It was a picnic or something. And what it was triggering for me because it was one of those first little picnics where we aren't married and you're around a bunch of other married friends and they've got their own kids, and it can be triggering because you see these family units that are still together, and when it's still fresh, that hurts.
But you know what we ended up doing after that is I think it's a better approach, and I recommend this is, well, if you can communicate with your former spouse, now if a friend asks can I invite you both? I say, yes, invite us both. We'll communicate about not comfortable. Like we will do the communication will be between us. Now Nate and I are fine, I think, unless I'm speaking for you.
Yeah.
Oh, fine, going to events, like same events and stuff. But we'll be like, we'll take that burden off of you. You don't have to pick who to invite to the picnic. Invite both of us. We'll communicate about whether or not we're ready for that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's how it's working now.
Then I don't feel like I wasn't invited to an event.
Right, because we started being like, oh gosh, they picked him this time, or oh, they picked her.
And that's not really what's going on. No one's sitting there being like, do we want Nate or Meg? I mean,
they might be.
Well, screw you if that's what you're doing. No. Anyway, if you do, that's fine. If you like her better, shove it. It's just like... But anyways, I think that is a really cool way to navigate it. And I think that's the way we have.
But that's, of course... As long
You're
as
allowed to like me more than her too. Most people do. I'm just.
Oh my gosh! Listen to it just hit.
I'm on a roll.
You are on a roll.
I said that was a joke. That was not to be.
I'm gonna set a boundary.
No roasting you on the podcast.
No roasting me like 5 times in a row. I'm going to have to cry myself to... I'm going to do none of that.
I think it's time
fine.
to wrap up. So, all right. So thanks so much for listening. We really do want you to like, subscribe, comment, anything that you can do to help get this podcast out there. We've gotten a lot of great feedback about how this is helping people who
and how
aren't
amazing
even,
I am and that you like me better.
Yeah, exactly. About how we're like people that aren't even going through divorce, going through breakup, or just in general, like navigating feelings and thoughts. We want you to be part of our community. We really, really do. You want to mention the social handles?
You can find us at Divorce Not Divided on Facebook, and then you can find us on our Instagram, which is at Divorce Not Divided Podcast. Also, our website is live, and that's divorcednotdivided.life.
.life, not .com, .life. Okay,
.life.
So much for that podcast, everyone. Started with chickens, and then we end with a roast. Dad joke. So, okay. We love you all. Have a great day.